Hello. Hello, everyone. It's Morgan, a member of the Smart Brown Girl Book Club Syllabi cohort, and tonight I'm here to discuss the final section of Hood Feminism. Tonight we'll be talking about housing. Let me read all the chapters. We'll be going over housing, reproductive justice, eugenics, and maternal mortality. We'll be going over the chapters after that called Parenting While Marginalized. And of course, the final chapter, Allies, Anger, and Accomplices. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. We will get started with the first chapter in this section. The first chapter of in the final section of our Hood Feminism discussion is, of course, housing. So let's go ahead and get into the discussion. If you haven't already, make sure you purchase the syllabus for this. Give me a second. I want to pull up my ebook on my phone so that I can refer to it throughout our discussion. I will also give pages, but because this one is a little clearer than another ebook that I had, but I may not be able to for some parts just because my ebook was kind of funky. But we'll just go ahead and get right into the discussion. So housing. Mickey Kendall brings us this chapter on housing policy, and ultimately she is telling us why housing is a feminist issue. And she is making a case for housing as a feminist issue and talking about all of the reasons why it hasn't been regarded as a feminist issue thus far and why moving forward it needs to be. Especially because her main point is that housing disparity, housing issues are issues that primarily impacts women, and of course, if you break that down further, it primarily impacts women of color, and from there, it primarily impacts Black women. So, if you have the syllabus, follow along with me. If not, if you haven't purchased the syllabus yet, it's still available on smartbrowngirl.com. So make sure you purchase it. It'll really help with this discussion tonight. But I'm going to pull some questions from the syllabus and some quotes from the text to guide our discussion. The first quote that I think really kind of guides this chapter is on the second page of the housing chapter, and she says the housing crisis isn't accidental. It's a direct result of a series of decisions made in many cases by people who are well aware that marginalized people will bear the consequences of those decisions. So this is a very simple read here that kind of shows us that where she's going for the remainder of this chapter. She started this chapter off with another personal anecdote before she started to lay out the statistics behind the housing crisis. So her personal anecdote was about her own experience with housing and how, she was living in a low income neighborhood and how her housing situation was after she left a bad relationship. And she uses her personal story throughout the chapter to kind of tie it in and to give you a real world example that puts a story to all of these numbers that we see thrown around. So I know one of the main things that I wanted to kind of discuss tonight was the idea or the concept, the occurrence of gentrification. She talks about gentrification later on in the chapter, but I do want to go ahead and jump to that to make sure we get to discuss it. So the quote on gentrification reads as follows. If you can follow along with me, I don't have page numbers in my ebook, but this is on the 4th and 5th page of the housing chapter. And the quote reads, And they run right into gentrifiers who pledge to solve the problem by revitalizing neighborhoods with cute little boutiques and coffee shops. The faces of gentrification are often young, white, and female. And while the gender pay gap means that white women are unlikely to be able to compete against white men for property in desirable areas, they often out-earn most other demographics and can afford to take advantage of lower rents and larger spaces in communities of color. So, of course, this is another chapter that ties back into the larger issues that we've been talking about already. We've been talking about white women's relationship with feminism and how white women's feminism is very exclusive. I won't even say care about each other as a group, they care about themselves. It's a very individualistic mindset. And again, black feminism, hood feminism is about community. So, in this particular section, she's talking about how gentrification is primarily pushed by white women. Hi, welcome, welcome. But yeah, it's mainly pushed by white women who, cannot outbuy, outsell, outdo white men. But in these spaces that they are gentrifying, they are ultimately the oppressor. White women can move into these relationships to these neighborhoods. I was reading the book. They can move into these neighborhoods and completely wipe out the community that's there, but because of their relationship to, women's rights issues or their proximity to oppression gives them the space to kind of play victim and maintain a victim ideology. And then further down, but in the same area, she writes, in theory, gentrification can bring services and jobs to community. In practice, it means opportunity for some and criminalization for others. It's easy to dismiss claims by residents of increased police presence as speculative when you're new to the area, but for those who have lived through the past few decades in major cities, they have seen the lack of investment in those neighborhoods as children and later as adults. Even as gentrification has become a norm in major American cities, you can drive just past a new street, planters full of flowers, the boutiques and coffee shops, right into urban blight. So, what I wanted to talk about from the kind of a thought that stemmed from the gentrification topic that she brings up is this idea of like black gentrification being the answer. We have this, I would say, kind of obsession or this group of black people who believe that putting a black spin on something that is systemically oppressive inherently makes it better. So, we see people, for instance, in Atlanta and different black cities across the country. Like we see like T.I. and Killer Mike in Atlanta. They are often kind of the people who perpetuate the idea of black gentrification. And they do so under the guise of liberation. And they talk about how, the black dollar and buying up these areas is what's going to save black people. But we know that's not the case. But I just want to have a conversation about, in this case specifically, the idea of black gentrification. And if you've read this section, you can kind of follow along with me. And we can just unpack and kind of break down why gentrification in and of itself is an issue. And why spinning it and making it ethnic and colored isn't the answer. So, and then another point that I wanted to discuss, I'll just tack this on, the same congenial chatter from the stoop on the corner that can be comforting to women of color is filtered through the lens of street harassment because a man of color is speaking to a white woman. So also the idea of, white women coming into these urban spaces and, um, you know, completely changing the dynamic, changing the landscape. And there's over policing in this neighborhood. But for a white woman, that's security, because for some reason she thinks that this black man is, harassing her, and he really has just been sitting here for the last 20 years speaking to everybody that walks by. Not catcalling. That's a whole nother issue. But, just these pillars of the community that really make the black communities what they are, and these different elements that set black communities apart from other communities, the different things that make our culture and our communities in certain spaces uniquely ours, are now being demolished and replaced with, modern, nicely kind of formulated buildings. Hey, Alana, welcome. Um, yeah, no problem. We are discussing housing right now. So yeah, just go ahead and jump in. And this is something that I saw in a few years ago. If I don't know if anyone here is from DC or has been to DC. I visited DC a few years back, and I was in the area around Howard, and I was at a restaurant. I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but it's a restaurant that has been there for several years. It's a black restaurant, very, very well known and well respected. And right next door to this restaurant is one of those, like, what the modern architecture is, this like apartment or this condo that's built, and it looks so out of place. You have Howard, then you have this restaurant, and then you literally can see the shifts happening. With DC being known as, or I'll say formerly known as the Chocolate City, this is a black city. Not just a black neighborhood, this is a black city. Like the black culture in DC is strong. So to see gentrification happening in real time is appalling. And I think, and it's sad. It's really sad because you see businesses like that black restaurant. I believe they're still open, but you start to see those businesses who have been staple in the community for 60, 70 years, be bought out, be knocked down, be replaced by a Starbucks, just all these different things with no regard for the people who frequent it, for the people who live there. It's just completely and utterly an issue. So I do not understand how T.I. and Killer Mike think putting a black man's twist on gentrification is going to be what saves us. You said you have a friend. I have friends in an interracial couple who are relatively middle class, and they were so torn because the houses in Baltimore are so cheap. But we kept coming back to the fact that they would be gentrifiers if they moved into those neighborhoods. Yeah, and I know that was a common conversation in undergrad when a lot of the black students were preparing to graduate, specifically like the black. I know I had this conversation with black business school students. They often talked about, okay, well, my degree is in finance, so clearly I need to work in, like, I want to help my people, so I need to do something that's gonna strengthen us in the economic sector. So I'm gonna go, like, buy back the block. And it's like, okay, there are people living on the block. Let's go talk to them. I think, let me see. Hey, Jolene, you say you're from Chicago where this is happening with school in ATL. The gentrification is strong. Yeah. And it's so stark. Like, you can really draw lines to show where it's happening. It's so, black capitalism is so convincing, until you read. And then, it's just, it seems like it could be the answer. Yeah. And T.I. and Killer Mike they appeal to a large group of people who don't understand that capitalism, no matter how you spin it, no matter who's in charge, is a problem. You can't just, put a hashtag woke, stay woke, hashtag Black Lives Matter in front of capitalism, colonialism, and be like, oh, but it's black now, so it's for us, by us. That's just not how it works. We cannot confuse liberation with, like, trying to switch out the power structure or flip these power dynamics, because that you're just reinventing the issue. So, another point from this chapter that I found really interesting, or also this chapter, it brought a lot of thoughts to me, and it made me think about, like, the neighborhood I grew up in, and we're still on housing. It made me think about how, growing up, the neighborhood that my family lived in was very black. It was a lower income neighborhood, but we had all of these different things that made our neighborhood safe for us. we felt safe. So of course, that this quote says, quote, while white women might perceive quiet streets and a high police presence as safety, for women of color, this is often a precursor to violent interaction with agents of the state. For communities of color, loitering isn't a real crime. It's an excuse for police to harass someone for sitting on a porch or having a cigarette outside the barbershop. We This reminded me again how we really rely on community, even outside of um, feminist spaces and outside of like all women's spaces. Black people in general, we really have a strong, deeply rooted appreciation for community. Um, I know, like, just growing up, you could think of like the different people just kind of hanging out on the corner, and it's just like they're just doing them. And if they're not there, something might be wrong. It's their presence that really, makes that community what it is. It's those little things, like, some of us might remember like the neighborhood candy lady. If her door wasn't open or if she wasn't readily accessible, then something might be wrong. But then you have these white women who move in and they see that as criminal. You see the daily lives of this group of people, the things that make their community special and safe for them. You see those things as criminal. And another element of gentrification is not only stripping those people of their safety and displacing them, but she talks about um, opportunity, because on the surface level, we talk. I know I had a conversation with a black man, and he said, well, if I'm, if I, a black man, move into this neighborhood and I redo it, I can bring opportunities to my people. I can bring opportunities. But the issue with opportunity is that generally the people in those neighborhoods are not going to get them, even if you make your gentrification, blackity black, as black as you think it can be. You are not catering to the people in that area because you're displacing them. No matter how you try to spin it, you are displacing those people. Let's see what y'all said. Yeah, housing, education, and policing are all tied together. This section made me this section even brought back some of the quotes and just some of the conversation that we had on the fear and feminism chapter. It's like you really realize again, for anyone who was on the call yet the video yesterday, the discussion yesterday on Black Feminist Thought Chapter 12, when we were talking about the structural domain of powers, how all of these things are interlocking. You can't just kind of take one and pull it away, because they're all so tied, and they're dependent on each other. They rely on each other in so many ways. So we'll keep moving down. But I wanted to get you all's thoughts on how we move forward with maintaining that that housing is a feminist issue, or that, housing should be a concern of feminists, because with mainstream feminism being what it is, being a very white dominated field, white women, they're doing the bulk of the gentrification. How do we begin to push out this idea and create these spaces to where the conversation happens, and we're beginning to see housing as a feminist issue, because it's black women who are getting the bad end of the deal when it comes to the housing crisis. And then another question from the syllabus. I see it's a few more people who join. So if y'all haven't gotten the syllabus, smartbrowngirl.com. Alana, you say you struggle with gentrification. I know I can't gentrify because I don't have the textbook power, but there are so many ways that I can displace people. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So what do you mean when you say you, like, are you thinking about doing something that might be considered gentrification if someone else did it? Like, where does your, like, what does your struggle with it come from? Is it just kind of like a conceptual struggle, like just understanding how you can play a part in it? And yeah, but I'm gonna go back to the syllabus and pull another question. which I think will tie into what you just said, Alana. What does it take to acknowledge our own privileges, and why is it important to do so? So, what role do we play? I'm not like I said yesterday. I'm not big balling. I don't have any money, but I have some class privilege. I can displace someone in some way. Hi, Elias. Let's see. Can we elaborate on what part? Okay, so let's keep going. I'll go back to the chapter. You said local politics is important, but also calling out shitty landlords. And well, you live in a casebook gentrified area in New York. Okay, I see what you mean. And my let me think. Let me think. But there was something I was gonna say. I almost lost my train of thought. Oh, with your comment on shitty landlords. There was, where did I see this? Just yesterday. Someone was talking about how with this current housing crisis, and how a lot of people have been affected by the pandemic, with people being unable to pay their rent, landlords have been, you know, coercing their tenants into having sex in exchange for not having to worry about the rent. And I'm just like, the landlords like have to go through like a training or something to be as terrible as they can. And there was what's the rapper with the song, designer, the panda guy. He which I mean, don't know why I would know this, but he, apparently he's a landlord, and he made headlines for covering his tenants' rent for a few months with the pandemic. And it's sad that narrative of landlords is an anomaly. You say you were talking about the gentrification thing that Alana mentioned. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think she elaborated on that. But as far as feminist issue, and viewing housing as a feminist issue, the when she speaks on this in the chapter, she says housing is ultimately one of the most pressing feminist issues because the impact of housing instability can reverberate throughout not just one person's life, but the lives of those around them. This does not mean that feminists need to ride in as saviors. These issues are complex and require not just a great deal of knowledge, but a balancing act of existing resources and lobbying for better policy, alongside the cultural work of changing the attitude and the cultural work of changing the attitude and the housing, that housing is not a human right. So, say Jolie, you say, we have purchased property as income in gentrified areas in ATL. We own it, but no black people live there. It's a double-edged sword. You want to help the community, but you cannot discriminate with those who live there. So, what is the black upper class, middle class to do when we are I'll say, for those who are aware of how the housing crisis is affecting black people, but also conscious of not wanting to continue contributing to that crisis. What are we to do? What is this group of class privileged black people to do to support the black women who are being affected by this housing crisis? And this going back to the syllabus, the question in the syllabus says, how does Mickey Kendall describe the relationship between gentrification and criminality? Have you witnessed similar acts of displacement within your own neighborhoods and communities? And then to add another layer to that, how do you think that you have, I'll say, possibly participated or been affected by, wherever you fall on either end of the gentrification spectrum? Like, we can discuss from there. You said there's a great special advice called Black South Rising that touches on these issues and what Jolie mentioned about Charlotte. Okay. Yeah, I like Vice. Some of their specials sometimes hit or miss. They either get it or they don't. But I'll watch that. I'm also curious. Y'all don't have to tell me where you live, but like regionally, where are y'all located? I'm southern, but I'm curious about where y'all are because I know gentrification looks different. It happens different in different ways. Geographically. So where are y'all in the? Assuming everyone is in the U.S., but I mean, even if you aren't, I'm also interested in your experience or understanding of housing and gentrification. And I think that I use T.I. and Killer Mike as, I guess, my case study, or the men I wanted to call out because we're seeing them, or we saw them recently in the news, begging us to stop looting. But it's like, I thought y'all was supposed to be our revolutionaries. Like, we knew that they weren't, but it's South in Texas. Okay, so you close to me. Well, Texas, you might not be close to me. But yeah, with Tion and Killer Mike being in the news, I think it's really interesting that their politics are being called into question now more. You think that the things that privileged Black people can really use their resources to advocate against. I think the things that privileged Black people can really use their resources to advocate against. Yeah. So what she mentioned this in the chapter, so I'm curious, what would a campaign, a feminist a feminist pushed campaign against the housing crisis or against housing reform look like? Like, how could that manifest itself? Atlanta, you see South of JR, but you live in NYC. Okay, cool. What would that look like? But we're gonna say that we're gonna move on towards reproductive justice. Rural Michigan. Ooh, interesting. Okay, Denisha. Rural Michigan. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Reproductive justice, eugenics, and maternal mortality. So what I really liked about hood feminism is that each chapter, the way that they connect is just like, as you continue reading, you realize that these things are they really work together. But reproductive justice, eugenics, and maternal mortality, which is, I'm gonna say something that gets me really heated. Um, you say you support the housing organizers. I was supporting the housing organizers already on the ground. Yeah, and pushing them towards the forefront. Because, as we move past, or I'll say, expand our activism and expand our knowledge beyond advocating against police brutality, we're realizing on social media that there are so many other aspects that we have to combat when we're talking about, true liberation, and housing is one of them. And there are some Black feminists who are already out here doing the work. But we haven't, I don't think on a large scale we've gotten to a point to where we've really identified housing as big of a problem as it is. But reproductive justice. So just to kick off this section, go ahead, let's talk about what goes through your mind when you hear the term reproductive justice. I know I think about just the right to, or to not reproduce, and not only in terms of reproducing, but just having autonomy over your reproductive system. Each chapter takes issues and really taught me how to think about them differently. Yeah, I think hood feminism is one of those books that is going to become a staple in feminist literature. I mean, the book is sold out everywhere. I don't like ebooks, but that was the only way I could get it. So this book is definitely for this new wave that's coming up, and I think it's gonna prove to be timeless, but it's speaking to an entirely new generation as well as older generations. Yeah, reproductive justice, just it's about autonomy over your, this is my damn body. But then aside from that, there's also the conversation on eugenics. There's a conversation on, I've seen the conversation on social media about Margaret Sanger, um, killing the black babies. Oh, hi, Churis. I hope I'm not butchering your name. Highlighting the effects that housing issues have on mothers, families, health, education. Yeah, like the housing crisis has a direct effect on who has access to reproductive health centers. Like, where's your local Planned Parenthood? Like, all of these things tie together. You said that's how you understand it as well. It's not explicitly pro-choice, but it's about having the resources to make decisions for your reproductive health, right? And then Alana says that this chapter made you think about the ways in which white supremacy takes over black maternal care, and it's really crazy how people would tell her how to take care of her own baby. Deep sigh. Yeah, this chapter specifically was, I would say, one of the harder ones for me to get through, because I think we look at these individual cases of black women and their maternal health. Well, I'll say personally, I heard all these stories before having my baby, and I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but like, I just hope I don't die. Having this baby, I would like to be here to meet her. Okay. So reading this chapter, and it's like, you're not alone, but when you realize you're a part of a group of women who are going through the same thing, and it's so, the things that are affecting black women and their maternal health, it's morbid, and it's so scary. So she opens again with a personal anecdote, and she refers to the article that she wrote for Salon, I believe, yeah, called "Abortion Saved My Life," and she talks about how she'd already been having issues with she'd had issues with previous pregnancies. I believe she said she had a total of 5 pregnancies, but only 2 live births, so 3 miscarriages. But the personal anecdote that she begins this chapter with is about her 5th and final pregnancy, where she was a bit hesitant to even continue the pregnancy, but eventually just decided to go ahead with it because she wanted a daughter. And she ended up having another miscarriage, and healing from it, and moving through it. She writes this article called "Abortion Saved My Life," which prompts a whirlwind of pro-lifers harassing her and her family, making all of these different remarks, telling her she didn't need to be a mom anyway. She's a vet, so they even made comments about that, because I'm not sure if she's mentioned something with her leg. She refers to it as a bum leg, but there are all these different comments that were made about her, what they saw as her poor decision to terminate the pregnancy, that if she had tried to continue it, it wouldn't have worked, but it could have killed her. So, from this, she goes into just addressing the maternal mortality crisis, specifically as it relates to black women. So, again, we can talk about this as an issue in and of itself, or we can connect it back to the housing crisis, and how women in lower income areas are having even higher numbers of issues with their mortality rates while they're pregnant, while they're delivering, and even after. That's another aspect that we don't often talk about, and it's not always a result of postpartum depression that leads to someone taking their own life, there are issues that go unaddressed during pregnancy or during labor that result in a woman dying from a hemorrhage or some other issue after she delivers, and everything is fine. Like with Serena Williams, I believe Serena Williams had delivered her baby and she felt something was wrong and she had to, really push and push for them to check before they found the issue. And I'm glad she included those, and I'm glad that that Beyonce's story and that Serena story are common knowledge and that they're being pushed out now, because class does not at all impact, well, I won't say at all, but not the way that you would think it would. Ultimately, black women are not, these doctors do not listen to black women when they are, saying, I don't feel right. Something's not right with me. Something's not right with my baby. It doesn't matter if you are Lilo Morgan or Serena Williams. You are black, so you can bear pain. Let's see. There's another comment. You said this chapter made you think about a conversation with your mom about myomectomies, removing fibroids. You were talking to her about how sometimes black women go into surgery for something like this and they walk out with hysterectomies. Yes, yes, I think she talked about sterilization in here as well. Paternalism and racism. A lot of the language of people telling black and brown women what to do with their kids or on reproduction. This is for your own good. We make choices for you because you don't know any better. It's so freaking annoying. It's just, and okay, I wonder, what do y'all think about, does this, what you mentioned about paternalism and racism, does this, are we only allowed to address it as that, or is it only that when it's coming from people in a position of power, or do we also see it being reiterated in like familial circles and through family and friends? Is it the same thing there? Because I know my mom didn't agree with a lot of my personal decisions. Still doesn't, but she'll be okay. But yeah, there's a lot of, you know, you need to raise your child like this, and from the time you're pregnant, you need to walk like this, you need to sit like this. The larger you get, the more your belly grows, you need to do this, and you need to eat. Well, of course, there's that, but you and then in labor, you need to have this type of doctor. You need to make sure you're doing this and behaving this way because you want this to happen. And then when the baby is born, it's you want to do this with the baby, and it's just like a renewed thing. And I think it goes beyond white women's, like, or just other women's, having people in their ear, because with black women it takes on this air of like inferiority, as if black women are not capable of caring for their own children. When we didn't care for everybody else's, but when black women are caring for their own children, it's so much that goes into it, so much stigma. You think we internalize these messages and then we play it out interpersonally. It's complicated. Yeah, because I think that I was really prepared to hear a lot of things. If I had decided to go, with the doctor, I was like, doctors are gonna say this, doctors are gonna do that. But you anticipate having a village of black women, and I think a lot of people are, able to have a supportive village. But for a lot of black women, like you said, I think we have really internalized a lot of these messages, and to our detriment. And ultimately, it's not our fault. It's definitely a part of a larger ecosystem of problems. But I'm about to start rambling. Let me go back to y'all. Okay, so to the syllabus. What is at stake in the conversation of abortions? And why do people fight so vehemently against abortion? Why is it a right worth protecting? I mean, for one, it's a right worth protecting because, as we say, if it's something I choose to do, then I can do it. It's really that simple. But if you want to go beyond that, it saves people's lives. Oh, Denisha, do you think? Do y'all think black women? Yeah, yeah. I think black women have less access to doulas, and I also think that doulas are a lot of black women, at least I was not my generation necessarily, but I would say like maybe like the generation, like my mom's generation, probably is kind. I don't know. There's this group of women who is just now starting, black women who's kind of becoming hip to, doulas and midwives now. Yeah, and you say you think so. In your friend group, we're all thinking about doing doula training. There's a whole movement in Brooklyn. However, it's expensive. Oh, that'd be so great. That'd be so great. Um, And I know another thing. I think that a lot of black women who decide to have doulas are conscious of certain things and they want black doulas. And access to black doulas, there is one black midwife in my city. In my city? In my state. I think one in my city. And a handful of black doulas, but I mean, it's hard. Black doulas and black midwives are hard to come by. And a lot of black women will just, kind of decide to go, with their gynecologist. And then there's the money. Like doulas are not cheap. Doulas tend to be lower on the scale and they have more of a flexible like pay scale. But midwives are like, I'm delivering your baby. I want 9 grand, 10 grand. Doulas they tend to be more class aware. I'm not saying that midwives aren't, but doulas come in and they provide a number of Mama Glow. Okay. You've been giving me all the resources this week. I've been looking up everything you've been telling me to, Alana. But I think doulas are doing very good with addressing that class factor because access to a doula and access to a midwife and an alternative birth experience shouldn't, you know, be an issue. Are they covered through insurance? Typically, doulas are not covered through insurance. From my experience, from what I know in my region they really aren't covered through. They're not covered through insurance. And to get your midwife covered through insurance, you have to go through a very long process. And then even still, insurance generally doesn't want to pay them in full. And what the process is like a reimbursement kind of thing. So you will pay them, and then at the end of everything, your insurance will reimburse you something. Well, keep doing it, girl, because I'm you are giving me a lot to look at. But yeah, they're doulas and midwives. They're seen as a luxury. They're seen as a luxury, and I mean, in a lot of ways, I guess you could say they are, considering what happens in what can happen in the hospital setting. Let's keep moving through the syllabus, or we can continue to talk about the doulas and the midwives. Okay, I'm going back to the text. I wanted to read something else. Okay, let's talk about the pro-life movement. Okay, so she says, quote, when the pro-life movement brings up the women who abort fetuses with Down syndrome diagnoses, reproductive justice advocates need a better response than ignoring it. The conversation needs to be centered on resources, on support, and on countering ableist narratives. Excuse me. When they frame these statistics as proof of eugenics, as proof that the abortion rights movement doesn't care about people with disabilities, reproductive justice feminists must be ready to frame disability not just in terms of children and fetuses, but also in terms of adults with disabilities. The conversation about the right to choose should explicitly include the right for people with disabilities. It has to talk about the infrastructure and the access that they might need. It has to talk about the rights of people with disabilities to control their own fertility and sexuality. And then she goes on to talk about how people with disabilities are, she elaborates on that point and talks about how people with disabilities are so mistreated on interpersonal and on structural levels. We people constantly make ableist remarks just in general, and then when you add in the element of parenting, people question and doubt, and even are willing to try and take away the right to parent from people who have varying disabilities. And so let's get into that. And then I think we can also combine the discussion on this chapter with the discussion on parenting while marginalized, because with this point specifically, parenting while disabled, especially like if we're talking about a mental or learning disability or mental disability, something like that, even a physical disability, but any type of disability, the different issues that you face. So a black disabled woman, I'll say a black mother who has Down syndrome, she's going to be pushed to not have children. There is a young woman I know who has a very rare, I think it's like a chromosomal abnormality, but she has 3 boys and each of her children have it as well, and she has been discouraged from having any more children because people make comments where they say they're encouraging her to not have any more children because your kids are going to be bullied. So that brought up a very heated discussion on Facebook on whether or not she was selfish or whether or not she should be able to have as many children as she wants. And I think that we're already talking about parenting while you have a disability. You add in the element of race, the element of gender. If you're talking about a black disabled mother, like the question is automatically, why do you even feel like you need to have kids? And then don't let her be a black poor disabled mother. And it's just like, girl, what are you doing? You worried about the wrong thing. You have all these other issues. Why are you trying to have children? You know, the conversation around parenting while you are occupying various marginalized identities is another feminist issue, because parenting is not something that should be taken from you because you have Down syndrome. So a question posed in the parenting while marginalized section: what are some of the concerns that Mickey Kendall presents that are unique to marginalized parenting? And then from there, how does she define survival parenting? So while we talk about that, I'm going to pull a quote from Parenting While Marginalized, because I liked how she positioned those 2 chapters together, because it's making the discussion flow pretty well. But they're also just they're connected. If you're facing all these issues while you're pregnant, well, before you become pregnant, when you're pregnant, when you give birth, after, parenting while marginalized is the obvious next step. But I'm trying to find my highlighted spot. He said the quote. I haven't watched Little Fires Everywhere, but the quote is, "Years of having to make hard choices without good choices taught me some lessons about what kind of parenting issues really matter." I heard it's like what is it? Is it like a race show? Like somebody said it's like a white feminist versus black feminist kind of like thematic show. Is that the case? In your opinion? For some reason, I can't find the quote that I highlighted in Parenting While Marginalized. But I'll read this quote. It says, quote, "Insisting that it is harmless fun to pander to racist stereotypes or feigning A complete lack of knowledge about why parents of color are concerned about obstacles that are specific to their communities requires a level of short-sightedness that is intrinsically dangerous to all children. Mm-hmm. And there's another question on parenting while marginalized that I want to ask, but I want to give everyone a chance to kind of work through the previous questions. But basically, it's how do we begin to work through our own internal, biases and related to maybe who gets to be a parent, and or also who should be a parent, because we do. I think even if we have to check ourselves, we may see someone, that like poor black women who have too many kids. She had too many kids. She what's the rhetoric? She has too many kids. She on the system. Why she keep having kids? Like what's the well, let's break that down, because I hear that all the time. I'm like, that girl, she can have all the kids she want to have. No, I mean, we like if you. I think talking about like someone's right. Honestly, I'm not even gonna say that. I was because I remember having a conversation with my mom when she made that comment about someone, and I remember telling her it's been like a year or two since we've had the conversation. But I said, okay, she has a right to at the end of the day. Whether it's responsible, that's another conversation that don't really have anything to do with us. But what's right? What right she has? She can have kids. Another fire quote in this chapter: "Being a marginalized parent is an emotional and social tightrope over a hardwood floor without a net." Period. Denisha, I thought about Little Fires Everywhere when she was talking about how a child of color is better with a wealthy parent, even if the parent doesn't share their ethnic or racial background, and that is lies. Let's see, was that in? The most common narrative around is a white savior narrative which feeds the idea that a child of color is intrinsically better off with a wealthy parent, even if that parent doesn't share their ethnic or racial background. We assume that a lack of financial stability is an indicator of parental ability, despite knowing that the reasons for the wealth gap have very little to do with what might be best for a child emotionally and socially. Yes, which hits the point that I just brought up. Like, there's this viral video um, that for some reason came up on my suggested on YouTube of a white woman doing a black girl's hair. And of course, it made its way to Twitter, and they was like, "Why are you mad at this white woman? She's trying." And I'm like, "What? I don't know, girl. I don't know, girl. It's one example. We have to look at where we oppress others. Should lesbians, transgender women, mother have children and be parents? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that. I like yes. What's her name? Gabrielle Union. And what's her husband's name? Is that Dwayne Wade? Yeah, Dwayne Wade. He with is it Zaya? I think it's Zaya. I think it's Zaya. They're parenting, and that's more so than parenting a trans child, but their parenting is being called into question. Gabrielle struggled with infertility and eventually had a surrogate, and I've seen some comments directed towards her, like, see, this is why you weren't even able to have children. You know what you're doing. You say we need to talk about academic feminists telling grad students not to get pregnant before they get tenure. Ooh, ooh, yes. Mm, um, when I was in undergrad, there was a black woman in the history department who was going on for tenure, and I think she's 20, 28, 29, something like that. I think she's 29. She was 29 at the time. She was well preparing to begin, you know, the process or whatever. And she had just gotten married, and she had a conversation with my Mellon cohort about how, you know, she wanted to be a mother, but she didn't know if it was going to happen because the track to being a professor and to getting tenure is, you know, that's her baby. And I heard from her more so. I feel like the discussion with her was more so about her dealing with it, but she heard it from a lot of people. I heard it from a lot of other people. Another book that you recommend is about parenting hard choices, The Street and Petrie. First book by a black woman that sold over The Street. Okay. I just gotta go back to the comments when I finish these live streams and write down all your suggestions. Cool. But yeah, that's another good point, Anisha. And that goes back to what we kind of were talking about earlier with, you know, people trying to dictate and control black women's parental choices. Let's move on because we are almost out of time. But the final section is on allies, anger, and accomplices. And I'll just kick it off with this question: Do you all even value allies and accomplices? She gives I highlighted her. I'll say her definition, but does the difference, you know, really matter to you all? Because I have to say personally, I don't care for white people, like for I would say prioritizing white people, or for not prioritizing them, for even considering them. But I don't know, like I always hear that they have to be a part of our liberation in some way because they control so much. But I don't. I don't know. You know, we're in the age of Karen's running crazy on the internet. We're seeing so many white people who are trying to absolve themselves of guilt by posting Instagram photo carousels on their page and making posts on their stories. There was the story that just went viral. Well, it was removed. The Refinery 29 article written by a black woman called I took my first date. We took our first day at a Black Lives Matter protest or something, where she talks about her like amazing white boy and how, like, you know, it was so nice being out there with him as they punched the air and yelled Black Lives Matter. But where do we all stand when it comes to allies and accomplices, and is making the differentiation even important to you on a personal level? Um, I do like when she said, yeah, it is a really good closing to this section. She said, I mean, to the book as a whole. She said, we must understand that any feminist work done in public is supported by the under-recognized feminized work done by caregivers, sex workers, clerks, and cleaners. And we must be careful not to come in as gentrifiers of the feminism that comes out of survival. We have the power to help or to do harm, and the risk imposed on communities by ignoring what has been built in favor of some idea that we can do it better than people who have had to live with the consequences, even when we do not, cannot be ignored. Let's say you think being an accomplice means giving up power, and in this age, no one wants to give up any privilege. Right. Yeah. And I mean, okay, so, and then let's not center the discussion around white women, because we have the ability, or, you know, the we're in a we have positions of privilege where we can be accomplices to other groups of people, to other identities. So what is our role as a, well, I mean, she pretty much just outlined it for us, but I don't. Toni Morrison and removing the white gaze. Mm-hmm. No one has time to play emotional caretaker for allies who would be. Yes, yes to that quote, because I think that's so much of the conversation nowadays. It's, you know, so many tweets and so many Facebook posts. Oh my goodness! Like, it's like you said, Alana, it's so timely. It's like if my white friends haven't said anything, just know where we stand. And thank you to my white friends who are speaking out. And it's like, baby, let it go. Like, do you see what's going on? No one has time to pat your white friend on the back or call your white friend and be like, why haven't you said anything? Why want you to know where we stand? Baby, move how you move. Like, giving them too much energy. These white people, they do not need to, like, some of these white folks been crying more than black people, but I'm just like, baby, why? Why? Um, they're taking up a lot of emotional energy, specifically from black women, and I know so many black women who are allowing it to go down, but it's like, no, like, your life is on the line, your life is important, and to you need to hold on to that, to your peace as much as you can. You struggle with the common perspective of what people need to do their whole education. They had a lifetime to do their own education. They did nothing, not a damn thing. Like, and now that they are, hopping on the, want to be a part of the movement, we're supposed to break things down to them. Like, nah, it's go time. Yeah, yeah. No, like there's entirely too much going on to cater to white feminism, to cater to fragile egos. It's far beyond that. I don't think it's ever been at a point where it's been acceptable, but I think that we're definitely in a moment now where we have to move past trying to appease whiteness and trying to take up too much space, even in the ways that we can be an ally or an accomplice. We have to make sure we're not doing too much and we're not demanding emotional energy. I cannot, like, the black trans women who were murdered within the past 24 hours. If I'm going to a community of black trans women, I'm just, what y'all need me to do? I do not need to be trying to drain them of their emotional labor. I'm there to provide for them. But overall, I think that this was the perfect section, the perfect chapter to end this book. You said it's like your urgency to be walking to. For real, like, it's like something clicks one day and they're like, okay, look, I'm woke, but can you give me, like, stay woke 101 in 10 minutes? Because, and then they do all these little microaggressive things, like, going to social media and parroting everything that you just said and not giving you credit. Just it's those little things as well that shows you where these allies and these accomplices are. But okay, that hour went by fast for no reason at all. But yeah, this was our final discussion on hood feminism. Y'all can still go off in the comments. Um, I'll wrap up slowly. But yeah, if y'all have any, like, final thoughts on hood feminism, then I will say one thing to think about is how hood feminism can be put into conversation with Eloquent Rage. I think that those are two books that could really be foundational and could be like, if there was a course on Black feminism and we start with, like, the oldie but goodies and we move into contemporary works, Eloquent Rage and hood feminism have to be on the syllabus. So definitely think about that moving forward. But yeah, I really appreciate y'all engagement and talking to y'all. I love doing it. So thanks. And see you when I see you. Have a good night, y'all.